You wake up at 7. You're out the door by 8. You commute for 45 minutes, sit in a fluorescent lit box for 8 hours, commute back, and by the time you're home, it's 6:30 p.m. and you're so drained that cooking dinner means microwaving whatever's in the freezer and calling it a night. You scroll for an hour. You sleep. You do it again. And somewhere in the back of your mind, tucked behind the meeting reminders and the per my last email, anxiety, and the Sunday scaries that start hitting on Saturday afternoon, there's a quiet, uncomfortable question that you keep refusing to answer. Is this it? Is this actually it? Because here's the thing nobody tells you when you're 22 and fresh out of school and terrified and grateful just to have a real job. Your 20s are not just a phase. They are not a waiting room. They are not the boring appetizer before the main course of your life begins at 30. Your 20s are arguably the most neurologically plastic, energetically abundant, optionally unconstrained decade you will ever have. And right now, in real time, the traditional 9 to 5 is eating them alive. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just quietly, steadily, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year, until one morning you're 29 and you realize you spent the entire decade building someone else's dream on a salary that's technically grown 11% since you started but has actually shrunk in purchasing power because inflation didn't get the memo about your annual merit increase. Let me give you the numbers, because I'm not just out here being emotional about this. The average American spends roughly 90,000 hours at work over the course of their lifetime. 90,000 hours. That's more time than you will spend with your family. More time than you will spend sleeping, in many cases. More time than you will spend doing literally anything else in your entire existence. And for most people in their 20s, that 90,000-hour commitment starts before they've ever figured out who they are, what they actually want, or whether the path they chose at 22 in a panic, because rent was due has anything to do with the life they actually want to build. You are making a 90,000-hour bet on a version of yourself that doesn't even fully exist yet. And the house, meaning your employer, always wins. Here's what the math actually looks like when you break it down honestly. If you work a standard 9 to 5 with a 1-hour lunch break, you're giving 40 hours a week to your employer. Add in your commute, the national average is 27 minutes each way, so let's call it an hour a day, and you're now at 45 hours. Add in the 30 minutes most people spend getting ready specifically for work, the time spent decompressing after work because you're too fried to do anything productive, the emails you check on your phone at 9 p.m. just to stay on top of things, and the Sunday evening anxiety spiral that effectively steals the back half of your weekend. And you're looking at somewhere between 55 and 60 hours a week that your job is consuming, directly or indirectly. That leaves you with maybe 3 to 4 hours on weekdays for everything else. Everything. Exercise, relationships, hobbies, side projects, learning, rest, being a person. 3 to 4 hours. And most of that is getting eaten by Netflix and doom scrolling because your brain is too depleted to do anything that requires actual effort. This is not a personal failing. This is a structural reality. The system is designed exactly this way. And the financial side is somehow even more brutal than the time side. Let's talk about what you're actually being paid for those hours. The median salary for a 25 to 34-year-old in the US right now is around $52,000. After taxes, you're taking home maybe $3,400 a month. Rent for a one-bedroom in a mid-sized city, anywhere from $1,200 depending on where you live. That's before utilities, groceries, student loan payments. The average borrower owes $37,700, by the way, health insurance premiums, a car payment if you need one to get to your job in the first place, and the miscellaneous cost of simply existing in 2024. When you actually sit down and do the math, a lot of people in their 20s are left with a few $100s of genuine discretionary income per month. Maybe. And from that already thin margin, you're supposed to build an emergency fund, invest for retirement, travel, explore, have experiences, date, and also not completely lose your mind from the relentlessness of it all. The math doesn't work. It's not that you're bad at budgeting. The math genuinely, structurally does not work. And the response to this from mainstream career advice is to tell you to make your own coffee and stop buying avocado toast, which is so deliberately insulting to your intelligence that it would be funny if it wasn't doing real damage to real people. But here's what I actually want to talk about, because we can sit here and catalog the ways the system is broken all day, and that doesn't get you anywhere. What I want to talk about is the specific thing that the 9 to 5 is stealing that nobody seems to name directly: your experimentation window. Your 20s are not just a time when you have more energy, though you do. They are the time when the cost of being wrong is lowest. Think about this carefully. When you're 24 and you quit a job to try something, you're risking maybe $40,000 in annual salary. You probably don't have a mortgage. You probably don't have kids. You probably don't have a partner whose career and stability are deeply intertwined with yours. The blast radius of a failed bet on yourself at 24 is, by most objective measures, pretty manageable. When you're 34 and you want to make that same bet, you might have a mortgage, a spouse, a kid, a lifestyle that requires a certain income floor, a career identity that's been calcified over a decade. The bet is structurally harder. Not impossible, but harder. The 9 to 5, by consuming the majority of your waking hours and mental energy throughout your 20s, is specifically eating the years when you have the most to gain and the least to lose from experimentation. It's taking your highest leverage time and trading it for the lowest leverage outcome, which is a salary. I want to tell you about someone I know. I'll call him Marcus because that's not his name, but the details are real. Marcus graduated with a finance degree, took a corporate job because it was the obvious move, and spent 5 years being genuinely good at it. He got promoted twice. He was making decent money by 27. And then he had a conversation with me that I think about a lot. He said, "I'm good at this job. I just don't know if being good at it is the same thing as it being right for me." That sentence sat with him for 2 more years while he kept collecting the paycheck and the performance reviews and the LinkedIn endorsements. He's 31 now. He's still in finance. He's still good at it. He's also started talking seriously about wanting to do something else entirely creative work, building something of his own. But the longer he waited, the more the financial golden handcuffs tightened, the more his identity got wrapped up in the career he'd built, and the harder it became to imagine pivoting. The 9 to 5 didn't just steal his 20s. It made him dependent on the system that was stealing from him in the first place. That's how it works. That's the mechanism. It's not malicious. It's just the design. And the design works because it exploits something genuinely understandable about human psychology, which is that we optimize heavily for immediate certainty over long-term optionality. A paycheck landing in your bank account every 2 weeks is certain. The potential upside of spending those same hours building a skill, a business, a creative output, or an alternative income stream is uncertain. Our brains are wired to heavily discount uncertainty, especially when we're anxious, which young people entering the workforce basically always are. The 9 to 5 offers a version of safety that feels real and immediate. What it doesn't show you is the cost, the compound cost, accruing daily, of trading your highest potential years for a predictable, modest, often below inflation-adjusted income that leaves you with no assets, no alternative skills, no portfolio, no track record outside of a single employer's performance management system, and no clear answer to the question of what you would do if the job disappeared tomorrow. Which it can, and it does. The average American changes jobs 12 times over the course of their career. 12 times. Layoffs are not uncommon. Industry disruptions are not uncommon. The idea that you are building genuine, durable security by locking yourself into a single employment relationship for the bulk of your 20s is a comforting fiction. What you're building is dependence. And dependence is not the same as stability, even though it can look almost identical from the outside until the moment it collapses. So what do you actually do about this? Because I want to be clear that I'm not out here telling you to quit your job tomorrow with no plan and go manifest a lifestyle brand or whatever. That's not the point. The point is strategic. The point is intentional. The point is, if you are going to spend significant time inside a 9 to 5 structure, and for most people in their 20s, you are, because you have bills and because starting cold is genuinely hard, you need to be running a parallel track at the same time. You need to be investing those 3 to 4 hours of daily discretionary time into something that is building an asset, a skill, or an alternative. Not all of them. Not overnight, but consistently, directionally, on purpose. Because the difference between two people who both spend their 20s in corporate jobs isn't usually talent or luck. It's whether one of them used the margins of their 9-to-5 life to build something that gave them optionality, and the other one used those same margins to recover from the 9-to-5 and nothing else. Let's talk specifically about the skills gap, because this one is underreported and it matters enormously. The traditional employment path optimizes you for one thing: being useful to your current employer in your current role. The skills you develop inside a 9-to-5 are almost entirely context-dependent. You get good at the specific tools, processes, stakeholder relationships, and internal politics of one organization. Some of that is transferable. A lot of it isn't. Meanwhile, the skills that are genuinely creating leverage in today's economy, content creation, copywriting, software development, digital marketing, data analysis, community building, e-commerce, online education, are largely self-taught and built outside of traditional employment. And the people who are 27 or 28 and have been developing those skills for 3 to 4 years while also holding down a job are in a dramatically different position than the people who are the same age but spent those 3 to 4 years exclusively inside a corporate ladder. The former group has options. The latter group has one option: keep climbing a ladder they didn't choose in a building they don't own. I was talking to a friend recently. She's 26, works in marketing at a mid-sized company, and she said something that stuck with me. She said, "I feel like I'm getting better at my job but not better at my career." That distinction is everything. Your job is the specific role you're in right now. Your career is the multi-decade trajectory of your professional life and earning power. These two things are related, but they are not the same thing. A 9-to-5 will almost always make you better at your job. It will not necessarily make you better at your career, and it will definitely not make you better at building wealth, building independence, or building a life that you designed rather than defaulted into. Getting better at your career, in the modern sense, requires investment outside of your job's specific demands. It requires you to build a public body of work, to develop skills that aren't tied to your current employer's tech stack and approval processes, to cultivate relationships outside your immediate team, and to think about your professional identity as something you own rather than something your employer issues you like a badge. And then there's the wealth dimension, which is the one that makes me the most frustrated when I think about it honestly. The 9-to-5 model in America is specifically designed to make you a consumer, not an owner. You earn income. You spend most of it on the cost of living. You save a modest amount in a 401k that you won't touch for 40 years. You do not accumulate real assets. You do not build equity in anything you control. And the people, the genuinely wealthy people, the ones in the top 10%, the top 1%, they are almost universally building wealth through ownership, not employment. They own equity in companies. They own real estate. They own businesses. They own intellectual property. The 9-to-5 salary is, in the vast majority of cases, a mechanism for sustaining your life, not for building your wealth. And nobody explains this clearly when you're 22, and you're just relieved to have health insurance and a reason to get out of bed. They let you spend 5, 6, 7 years learning this lesson through lived experience, by which point the compounding clock has been ticking for years on what you didn't invest, what you didn't build, what you didn't start. The people who are ahead financially in their 30s bang, not the people who had rich parents, but the ones who genuinely built something, almost universally started something outside of their job in their 20s, a small business, a rental property, a content channel that turned into a brand, an investment portfolio that they contributed to aggressively even when the amounts were small, a freelance practice that became a consulting business. They didn't quit their jobs necessarily. They ran a parallel track. They used the stability of the 9-to-5 as a launch pad instead of a destination. And that framing, launch pad versus destination, might be the single most important mental shift available to you right now. Because here's the brutal truth about what happens to people who treat their 9-to-5 as the destination. The years pass. This is not a metaphor. They literally pass. You go in on Monday, and suddenly it's Thursday, and then it's the end of the quarter, and then it's been 2 years since you told yourself you were going to start that thing. Time inside a 9-to-5 structure moves differently than time outside it, and not in a good way. It compresses. The routine collapses your sense of temporal progression because every week looks like the last one. You stop marking time by experiences and start marking it by performance review cycles and team retreats and the annual company all-hands where the CEO tells you this year is going to be different. And before you know it, you're 28, and you're trying to remember what you were excited about at 23, and the answer is honestly a little hard to find because you've been so deep inside the machine for so long that your own signal got quiet. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I want to be genuinely clear about that. I have talked to plenty of people who are thriving inside traditional career paths, who love what they do, who feel like the structure of employment suits their life and their personality and their values. That's real, and that's valid. And I'm not out here trying to tell everyone they should become an entrepreneur or a content creator or a remote digital nomad living in Southeast Asia on a striped dashboard. That's not the only alternative to a soul-crushing 9-to-5, but I am saying that you deserve to be on that path because you chose it, not because you defaulted into it at 22 and never stopped to ask whether it was actually right for you. There's a massive difference between someone who is 27 and in a corporate job because they evaluated their options, tried some things, and concluded that this structure suits them, and someone who is 27 and in a corporate job because they never really questioned it, never tested any alternatives, and arrived at a salary they depend on by the path of least resistance. The outcome might look the same from outside. The internal experience is completely different. One of those people has agency. The other one has a habit. An agency, genuine, tested, chosen agency over your professional and personal life is what your 20s are uniquely positioned to help you develop. Because in your 20s, you can afford to be wrong. You can afford to try something and have it not work. You can start a business and fail and recover. You can leave a job and take a pay cut to do something more aligned and survive. You can spend a year making less money to develop a skill that unlocks something you couldn't access before. The cost of that experimentation is manageable in your 20s in a way that it genuinely is not in your 30s or 40s, not because your 30s and 40s are worse, but because the stakes are structurally different by then. The 9-to-5, by making your income feel essential to your survival from the very start. And let's be honest, for many people it genuinely is essential to their survival from day one, because the cost of living is brutal and student loans are real, and the safety net is threadbare. It preempts the experimentation before it can begin. It makes the first option feel like the only option, and then the first option becomes your identity, and then changing your identity feels like losing yourself rather than finding yourself. This is worth sitting with. Who are you outside of your job? Not what do you do? That question is the problem. Who are you? What do you care about? What would you be doing if your income didn't depend on it? What does a genuinely good day look like when the calendar isn't full of meetings someone else scheduled? Most people in their mid to late 20s, if they've been deep inside a 9-to-5 culture since graduating, have trouble answering these questions clearly. And that's not a personal inadequacy. It's the natural consequence of spending your most formative professional years in an environment that defines you by your output, your title, and your contribution to goals you didn't set. The self that was curious and multidimensional and uncertain and alive with possibility at 20 gets slowly professionalized into a role. And the role is easier to maintain. The role doesn't ask uncomfortable questions. The role shows up on time and delivers on its KPIs and maybe even gets promoted. But the role is not a life. And somewhere around 27 or 28, a lot of people start to notice the difference. I want to talk about what the alternative looks like practically, because I think the discourse around escaping the 9-to-5 inch tends to be either wildly unrealistic hustle porn about building passive income streams from your laptop on a beach, or completely abstract in a way that doesn't help you do anything. Here's what I actually think is true. The goal is not necessarily to never have a job. The goal is to never be trapped by one. There's a huge difference. Being trapped means your income depends entirely on your continued employment at a single organization. You have no alternative skills or income sources to fall back on. Your professional identity is entirely mediated by your employer's validation, and the cost of leaving is prohibitively high. Not being trapped means you have marketable skills that are genuinely yours, and not just relevant to one specific employer. You have built at least some financial runway through savings or investment. You have a professional presence or track record outside of any single company, and the optionality to leave if the situation becomes untenable. Even if you choose to stay, the path to that second position runs directly through your 20s. And it requires you to be deliberately building things outside of your job's demands, on purpose. Even when you're tired, even when the weekend feels like the only time you have to breathe, even when Netflix is calling, and the couch is warm, and your brain just wants to not think for 6 hours. I'm not saying sacrifice all rest. I'm saying sacrifice some of the default consumption in favor of something that compounds. Not all the time, not at the cost of your mental health or your relationships, but consistently, sustainably, directionally. One skill at a time, one project at a time, one piece of work that represents something you built for yourself. Because the other thing nobody tells you is how much it changes the way you feel about your job when you have something outside of it. When you know that your income is not entirely contingent on the continued goodwill of one manager in one organization, something shifts in your psychology. You become less compliant in the ways that don't serve you. You start advocating for yourself more clearly because the floor beneath you is a little more solid. You stop taking bad treatment personally because your professional identity isn't exclusively invested in making this one relationship work. The 9-to-5 has less power over you when it's not your only option, even if it's your primary income. That shift in power dynamics is genuinely available to you, and it starts with building something, anything, that is yours. The people who look back on their 20s with something close to satisfaction are almost never the ones who optimized hardest for stability and followed the most predictable path. They are the people who use the lower stakes, higher energy, more optionally unconstrained nature of that decade to actually test things, to build things, to make bets on themselves, to take detours that looked inefficient at the time and paid off in non-linear ways later. The people who look back with regret are almost always describing a decade that passed in a blur of routine while they were waiting for life to really start, waiting for the promotion that would finally feel like enough, waiting until they had more time, more money, more certainty, more confidence. Waiting for a starter gun that was never coming. Your 20s are not a warm-up. They are not a credential-building exercise to prepare you for the real version of your life. They are the real version. Right now, this is it. The hours you spend this year are not coming back. The energy you have right now is not guaranteed to be there in 5 years. The low-cost experimentation window you have at 24 or 26 or 28 closes incrementally with every year and every obligation added to the pile. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because urgency is clarifying when it's accurate, and this urgency is accurate. The 9-to-5 will take as much as you give it. It will expand to fill whatever space you offer. Your inbox will always have something in it. There will always be a reason to stay late, to reply quickly, to prioritize the job over the thing you've been telling yourself you'll get to eventually. Eventually is not a date. Eventually is a trap. And your 20s are too short, too singular, too irreplaceable to spend them waiting for it. Start the thing. Build the skill. Make the bet. Run the parallel track. You don't have to blow up your life to start reclaiming it. You just have to decide clearly, deliberately, on purpose, that the hours belong to you first, and then figure out who you want to be with them. The 9-to-5 is already taking enough. Stop giving it the rest.